Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. The game gives us foundation ramps for 1, 2, and 4 meters. Today I'm going to show you how to make custom ramps of any angle. This can be extremely useful now that update 1.2 is in experimental, and the full release should be a few weeks to a couple months away. With 1.2, vehicles are much easier to use and set up pathing for. These tips can help scale the terrain a little easier in your playthrough. Welcome to my ramp testing playground. As you can see, I've done quite a bit of testing here. And I am using 1.2, so we'll go over the vehicles and the pathing a little bit on the second half. This all started because I wanted to scale a cliff in my last playthrough a little bit faster than the normal 2 meter ramp. And if I take a 4 meter ramp and my rail line here, if I place it, it will not let me place anywhere on a 4 meter ramp. In the past, you could alternate the 4 meter and the 2 meter ramps, and this would essentially give you the steepest usable ramp, but as you can see, it's a little bit wavy. And if I were to turn this on, it is not a smooth ride, and I'm not going to want to jump in there. It'd be much nicer if I could just make it a nice, solid, smooth track. Alright, so let me build them side by side so you can see. This is a 2, and then a 4, and then a 2, and then a 4. And that would average out to a 3 meter ramp. The way the naming convention with the ramps work is for every foundation you go, which is 8 meters, you're going up that many meters for the ramp. So for a 2 meter ramp, you go up 2. For the 4 meter ramp, you go up 4 meters. So that means if I'm going to go 4 foundations, and I want to do a 3 meter ramp, that means I need to go up 12 meters. And that should be the exact height as the top of this one. Yep, there we go. So now I'm going to put my beam in diagonal, and I'm going to place it right here at the end. And now I can take my rail line, and you can actually place them right on the beams. And I want to use the auto connect, and so I want to leave at least probably about a foundation, because you need a foundation and a half at minimum of a gap between 2 rails to connect them. So if I start about here, and then if I hold control, it'll force the rail to be straight, which is definitely what I want. And then place it right about here. And now I've got a stretch of track. Obviously don't need these. And it's set right at the 3 meter ramp section. And to place these, it's pretty easy. So I just kind of lined them up on, obviously in line with the train station. So for here, I'll just use the foundation line. So we place one, and then we're going to put this in Blueprint Auto Connect. Spin it around, H to lock it in place, and then we want them to line up, so it's going to merge in basically at that halfway mark. And then I hit page up a whole bunch of times, and everything should line up perfectly. So then we just need to click it twice, and it'll auto connect the rail for me. Now this one can go up a 3 meter ramp, and it is nice and smooth. Now one thing to keep in mind is if you increase the grade of the ramp, it is going to go slower, and if they're fully loaded on the way up, you may even need more locomotives. If it's going up empty and carrying a full load back down, then you have a little bit less to worry about. The beams make placing this much easier, especially with the auto connect. You can do this really quickly. But my suggestion would be to come up with one that's a little bit cleaner. There's a number of different ways you can do it, but what I did is I took the small concrete pillar, lock it onto the end of the beam, hit H, and then nudging it, it'll follow the beam. And now I can find more or less the middle. And if you like the way that looks, you could leave it clipped into here. I'm not crazy about this, so I am going to nudge it half a meter down. And now I can kind of get it out to about as far as I want. If I want to add a little bit of railing to each side, we'll just place 1 or 2 there. And then now I can place another 1, 2. And now I've got some support. And if I wanted to go straight down, like I have with this one, because if I attach it like this, then all of my supports are going to zoop out at that angle. But if I want them to look like this, where they're just straight up out of the ground, I'm going to place it on the Blueprint Designer, Then I could just zoop it up or whatever, place it there. And now when I place them, now it's easy to just zoop that down to the ground. And I'll also be able to just go through with my dismantle tool, filter it with painted beams, and then I can just delete all of the painted beams and it'll leave me with just the rail and the concrete supports. So that's how I built this one. Leaving the beams in there will make placing the whole thing much easier. Now the 3-meter ramp is probably the steepest I would honestly recommend, but it isn't actually the steepest you can make for your rails. So going up to the exact same height, this is the distance a 3-meter ramp would take to get up to there. This right here is how much more space you would need for a 2-meter ramp. So that is just solid 2-meter ramp all the way up. So it does save you a good amount of space. But if you wanted to save even more space, make this even steeper, I listed this as the rise over run to give you kind of the grade. So for the 32 meters you go horizontal, you go up 15 meters. So we go the 32 meters. For the 3-meter ramp, that was 12 meters. 16 meters would be the 4-meter ramp, which we've already shown the rail can't be placed on. So if I just go one lower, we can do a 15. Grab my rail, try to get it as centered as possible, and then bring it up to here. So the rise over run to give you the grade for a 4-meter ramp would be going up 4 meters divided by the 8 meters you go horizontal. So 0.5. So anything less than 0.5, the rail can be placed on. If I take a Mark III blueprinter, it is 48 meters, which means 0.5 would be 24. So I can go up to 23. So in a blueprint designer, this is the max grade I could go. So 23 over 48, that's the best grade. If you didn't want to use the blueprinter and you wanted to do it manually, you could get ever so slightly steeper, but I love my blueprints. I was supposed to make this video months ago, and a big reason I've been putting it off, this right here. Coffee Stain announced that they were going to make changes to vehicles and hinted at changes to the pathing and whatnot. So I wanted to wait and see what the changes would be like because I had no idea how that would really affect the vehicles. And I'm really glad that I waited. Here I have a whole bunch of tests. I made it easy on myself and just used the foundations where I could. So here's the 1 and the 2 meter. And then I made a custom road using the same methodology as I just showed you, just using a whole bunch of the small concrete pillars to create a custom road. So that is a 3 meter. Then we've got the 4 meter, and then doing the same thing, I just kept increasing it really, really high. And you're probably wondering why in the world did I make a 12 meter ramp? So let's be honest, that is absolutely ridiculous. For every 8 meters you go horizontally, you go 12 meters vertically. And that's because of this guy. Yeah, believe it or not, this is going to work. It's not going to be the easiest to look at, because we're basically just going vertical and the camera has a real hard time dealing with this. But yet 97, 93, 99, yeah, you can go up a really steep slope. That is realistically the highest slope I was able to get the Explorer to go up though. So that is what all of this experimenting led to. I would build the next one and the Explorer could make it up. So I had to make the next steepest one and the Explorer could make it up. Until I made it all the way up to the 12, and that was the limit. Anything above that, it's really hard to get on the ramp. So maybe you can make it steeper if you just had a more gentle slope to get actually onto the ramp and it wasn't so sudden. But hey, if you want to make personal roads, you can make them that steep. However, for all practical purposes, you're going to want to stick with something about half that. And that's because we have our new pathing in 1.2. If you go into the build menu, under transport, you've got your actual vehicles, and then there's vehicle paths. So each one can have a different one, and they do have different turn radiuses. I've just been using the universal vehicle path, just because I think it's easier, and I wanted to test all the vehicles. And placing these is going to feel very similar to placing rails. So using the scroll wheel, I can change the angle. So if we click it once here, now I can drag it pretty far, and we can turn it. If I hit R, I've got a straight build mode, and then go back to default, which pretty much works like a curve. And if I hold control, it'll force it to be straight. So once you place it, it'll stay yellow until we complete the path. That came off at kind of a weird angle, but there you go. And now it's a path. Although to really make things work, you need truck stations attached. The reason I said you're not going to want to use these is pick any of these, even a 10 meter. And if I try to place it on here, it just won't let me place a path. If I start at the bottom here and try to merge onto it, it's just not going to work. If I go down to the 8, same thing. Once we get to the 7 is where it finally works, although it becomes a little bit more temperamental. And 7 meters, I don't think is the easiest to work with. Even though I don't always stick to the world grid, I do really like to stick to the world grid as far as the height is concerned. I may change the angle and face things in a different direction, but I try to keep things on the world grid as far as the height is concerned. And so a 6 meter ramp is just going to be easier to work with because it's an even number. 7 meters, maybe it works for you. For me, I'm probably going to stick with the 6 meters. So with the 6 meter, if you see, I can place it here and then I can place it anywhere up here. And then you can just kind of build off of it. So 6 meters will work fine, so will the 7 and any of the more shallow ones. Alright, so let me give you the quick rundown on how this works. I go into the build menu and I pick which vehicle I want to use. If I want to use the fluid trucks, I'm going to need to switch these to the fluid truck stations instead for them to actually work. So for this, I'm just using the normal ones. So we'll take a tractor and then we want to place it right on the path, and you'll notice that it'll stick to it, kind of like the trains. Now the tricky part is, even if I place it just right in front of it, I wasn't able to get it to like immediately dock. So you pretty much have to put some amount of fuel into it, I think. Please correct me if I'm just doing it wrong. And then if we jump into the tractor, hit Q to bring up the menu. You've got your normal inventory here. And then if we go to vehicle path, I didn't name these, sorry, but we're just gonna click truck station 1 and 2. And then there's no extra options like there is with trains. So I think that's what they wanted to differentiate, is the trains will give you more options and more flexibility, but this kind of gives you a crash course on how all of it works. Because now they're very similar. We enable autopilot, and even if I'm on it, it'll still work, which is not how it used to be. In the past, if you were in it, it kind of disabled the autopilot. And if I bring out the dismantle tool, it makes seeing the path a little bit easier. And then it just goes. The truck works the same way. I just want to load up some fuel. Oh, and then even from here, I can go from the crafting bench over to the vehicle path. Very cool. Like both the truck stations and enable autopilot. And if I wanted to, I could switch this to what I'm actually using and see all the different fuel types. That is really cool. So I'm using package turbo just for this, and then it'll tell me 1.6 per trip, just shy of 3.8 per minute. And there they go. Go on their little trip. Obviously, 1 meter ramp, nothing special. And let's give these a full test by fully loading up the trucks. So with them fully loaded, let's see how quick it gets up each of these different ramps. Not bad. I think it hit 60 something, and then since it needed to turn, I think it starts to slow down once it gets close to the top. And there you go. Even completely full, it was able to get up the 7 meter ramp and still hit the same 64, 65 kilometers. Then it starts slowing down because it needs to turn and make it into the next truck station. Now on the way down, I would think that they would go a little bit faster, but as you can see on the 7 meter one, it's just kind of riding its brakes the whole time. And I think part of it might be how some of the tracks ended up placing and connecting, like it did this kind of weird thing. So I think you might have to play around with them just to get it much straighter, because on the other side it seems much straighter. But on the downward spot, I must have done something when I saved it, and it's doing this little thing each time. And I think that might be slowing it. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, that they may slow down if they've got those weird little bumps in them. I built these just as simple as possible, just so I could do all of this testing. But with just a little bit more effort, you could make a ramp that looks a little bit better in my opinion. So this is probably what I'll use for the next playthrough for a 6-meter ramp. The advantage to sticking with foundations is you can use the patterns, which is really handy, and I mean, using the foundations is just simple. Unfortunately, patterns don't work on concrete pillars. So there's nothing that I can place on here besides just kind of adding an extra beam to kind of go down the middle to separate the 2 lanes. But there's plenty of things you could add in there to do that. So to place these, the way I found easiest is if I look at this beam right here, hit H to lock it in place, and then I nudge it 2 meters over so that the beams are touching, and then I just have to page up the 24 meters. And then once everything is lined up perfectly with the beams, because then I know I'm keeping the same angle, I'm going to place this one. And then I've just got to manually fill in this gap. So with the 6 meter, thankfully things work out really nicely. It's exactly 2 pillar gap. But with some of the other angles, like with the 3 meter or something like that, chances are they're just going to clip into each other a little bit. And then for the beam, diagonal mode might not work the greatest to join the 2. But if you put it in freeform, it'll connect to the end of the other beam. And then it just looks like one solid beam all the way down. And so far, that's all I've got to share with the new vehicles and the ramps and the roads. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. I hope these tips and tricks will help you build out your road and rail networks a little easier. I'll definitely be using more roads and vehicles in my next playthrough. So look forward to that. And thanks for watching.